If you've taken my classes before, you know that I really like to use bias tape. It's called bias tape. It's a little bit of a fooler. It is actually cotton fabric run through a little device called a bias tape maker, and what that does is it folds the two edges of the fabric in. So these are raw edges. It folds them in, comes out after I press it. When I flip to this side, I have a nice strip of fabric that has finished edge on both sides. I can cut this either straight or on bias. If I cut it on bias, we'll talk about that in just a second, it will curve and follow an angle easily. If I cut it on straight of grain, it makes nice straight strips that I can use for many things. I use this when I'm making purses, totes, zippy bags, placemats, anything where I want a nice straight line that I don't want to piece into a quilt. I can put this right over and it will serve the purpose. To cut bias strips, here I'm starting with a fat quarter. I have my rotary cutter and I have my piece of fabric. My fabric is about the size of a fat quarter. I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to look for my 45-degree line, which is right here, and I also have one right here. I'm going to lay that 45-degree line right across the bottom edge of my fabric, and that gives this cut a 45-degree angle. So I can just cut right up, and I have a bias piece of fabric. Now what I want to do is cut strips of this the width that I need to put into my bias tape maker. This one is the 1-inch strip. The instructions say to cut it at about 1 7/8. I always cut it a little bit scant. It gives me a little bit better finish when I do that. So I'm going to cut this one at, I wrote it on the end, 1 3/4. The only thing you need from the instruction sheet, once you know how to do this, is the size to make your strips. So I always just write it on the end. I have my initials there, just in case I go to class and get mixed up with somebody else. And I want a 1 3/4 inch strip. So I'm going to just line that up. And I'm going to cut that strip at 1 3/4 inch. And I can continue to cut more and more pieces. Again, these are cut on bias, which means that they curve real easily. If I cut it on straight of grain, it will not make a curve. I'm at my ironing board. I have my bias tape maker, the bias strip that I cut, my best press spray, and a pin, and my small iron. What I'm going to do is mist my strip with best press. Best press will make a really nice crease for what we're doing. My end is cut at an angle already. If it was a straight edge, I would give it a little bit of an angle. It's just easier to put it into the tape maker. You're going to just slide the end in here, and as it starts to go through, you'll see your fabric right inside. The tape maker is blue and my fabric is cream. You can kind of see where it's starting to come through. I'm going to just use my pin and use my pin to slide it out the end. I'm going to just kind of move it side to side so it's centered in there. I can pull it back and forth a little. Don't worry about that first inch or so. You'll spend a long time getting that straight and it really isn't worth it. Just take that little end. So I'm slid back and forth so I don't have any wrinkles in here. Looks to be pretty good. And I'm going to put that down. I'm going to take that pin again, and I'm going to put the pin in like this. And what that's going to do is it's going to hold, and I'm just pushing it right into my ironing pad. When I pull the bias tape maker this way, the fabric won't pull out. If I put the pin in that direction, when I pull this and move my tape maker along, it's going to pull that out of the pin and it won't be holding. I take my little mini iron. You can use a big iron. You want to be sure that the surface of the iron right at the edge is right along the silver end here. And you can see I'm actually just using the iron. Excuse me, I gotta get going here. Okay, and I'm just pushing the bias tape maker with the iron. And what's coming out the other end is beautifully made bias tape. And I can just keep going. I move fairly slow so that the iron has time to set the edge. I'm going to just pull this a little more forward and continue to slide. And that's going to make my piece of bias tape and slip right off the end. And now I have a very nicely made piece of bias tape. It wobbled a little as I was doing it because I'm at an odd angle here, but it'll straighten right out. When it's done, I usually just wrap it around my fingers into a little roll. What that does is it will set in this shape, the edges folded in while it cools, and it'll stay nice and flat for me now that it's cool. If I leave it just lay, those edges will flip up and it won't stay nice and flat. But that's all there is to making bias tape. The big decision is what width you want and what you're going to do with it.